Great. So, Ashuriena, welcome, first of all, and thank you for being willing to do this. Now, am I correct in saying that you're currently the president of the Assyrian Aid Society here in the Los Angeles area?
Yes, that's correct.
That's fantastic. You seem very young for such a big responsibility. I think that's quite impressive. I know I am impressed. And obviously, your family's history, your family's background is something that I think everybody would be interested in hearing about. So would you be willing to start out by telling us a little bit about your family, what they have experienced and endured, because it's sort of a very personal snapshot of some of the incredible, suffering is really the only appropriate word we can use, that the Assyrian Christian community has endured through the centuries. They have faced not only persecution, but massacres and genocides, and again and again, an effort to wipe them off the face of the earth. And they are the most ancient of the Christian communities in the very heart of the lands from where Christianity sprang. And so, it is a matter of really incredible importance to the whole world. It should be, but I think sometimes understanding it through what happened to a family and what a family experienced gives us a more personal view into it. So let me turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate that we've all come together to work on these issues and move forward together in a positive direction. So I am a second generation Assyrian. My dad was born in what's today known as Kirkuk, Iraq, and my mom was born what's today known as Qamishli, Syria. Their story is pretty interesting, but it's not unique to the Assyrian community. Most Assyrians, when you talk to them about your family history, they have very similar stories. I'll start with my maternal side. My ancestry on my mom's side comes from what's modern-day Iran in the region of Urmia, and there was massacres in the village of where my mom's side came from, and they fled to Habania, Iraq. From there, they fled to Mosul, where my maternal grandmother was born. And she was 8 years old, and the Semele massacre happened in 1933, which was one of the genocides that actually helped coin the term genocide. 6,000 Assyrians were killed there. My grandma was 8 years old, and she fled, and they ended up in Syria. Actually, she passed on last Wednesday. She was 98 years old.
98, though, what a life.
Yeah. And there wasn't a day that she didn't remember what she saw as a little girl. And when I went to Iraq, actually, I got to see the mass graves of Semele, and it was really emotional for me because it's treated as a trash heap now, and you'll see dirty diapers and empty oil cans and trash, and then you'll see like visible hands and like hip bones there. And sorry, and it's tough because now there's also a cell tower built there to prevent the excavation of those bodies so we can properly bury them. And also Assyrians that have tried to clean it have been arrested for cleaning that mass graves. They weren't charged with anything, they were just abused and then released after several days. Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. On my dad's side, their family also came from Urmia, and they fled during the genocide, the Ottoman genocide in 1915, to Iraq in a camp that was built by the British in Bakuba. Then they moved to Baghdad at another refugee camp, and then they moved to Kirkuk, where my father was born. He was in his 20s when the Ramadan Revolution happened, and Iraq, which was Abdul Karim Qasim, was assassinated, and my dad was in Baghdad, and he saw the revolution and the persecution that Assyrians were going through by the Ba'athists. There's actually an interesting story that my dad always tells. Was he was at his sister-in-law's house, or his brother's house, and him and his sister-in-law were there, and his nieces, and the Ba'athists came knocking on the door, and they pointed rifles in their faces, asking for my uncle's vehicle so that they can go throw Molotov cocktails at the opposition, at the civilian opposition. And he told his sister-in-law, like, we have to get out of here. This is not safe for us, because they started infiltrating even the sports organizations, the cultural organizations, and the churches. So they were just imprisoning Assyrians. So he fled to Lebanon, he stayed there for a few years, and he came to America through political asylum.
It's quite a story, and as you say, it's just so gripping, but it's not unique.
Yeah.
It's not at all unique. Now, I mean, you talked about the Samaleh massacre. You had family members who were impacted during the reign of terror by ISIS as well.
Yes.
Could you maybe, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, my relative, who they didn't want me to mention how they're related to me in fear of retaliation, because they do have family still there. In Syria, he was captured by ISIS for 45 days. He was abused and tortured. He was sold 8 times. Every time they were paying a ransom, and they were just selling him to another group, even though they were receiving ransoms for him. His wife was afraid to be at home because she would get threatening calls that they were going to throw her husband's dead body in front of her house. And it was so common that a lot of her neighbors did have their sons or their husbands' dead bodies thrown in front of their houses. So it was 45 days of her just being tortured by these phone calls while her husband was physically being tortured. At one point, they left an SD card on where he had a store, showing the abuse, and she couldn't even see it. Her neighbors actually looked at it and said, "I don't know if you want to see it, but they're beating your husband in this in this video." And once he was released, he had both sides of his jaw were completely broken, and there was fractures throughout. He had to get his mouth wired shut for several months to heal, and it took about 2 years for his healing process. And he doesn't really talk about the details of the things that he experienced, because he's just so uncomfortable with just remembering everything that happened. That was around March of 2015, and then my cousin Abraham was captured by ISIS, and I remember this day. My mom turned on the TV early in the morning, as she normally did, to these Middle Eastern channels, and the first thing that came up as she was making a cup of coffee was my cousin in an orange jumpsuit with 2 other men, and he just says, "I am a Syrian Christian," and then he states his name, Asher Piro Rostam Abraham from Tel Tamar, Tel Jazeera, and then after the other 2 state their names, they just shoot them in the back of the head. We contacted his sister that was in Chicago, and she actually found out earlier that morning from a Facebook notification that someone had sent her a video of her brother's execution. And it was like, that memory is like burned into my head forever. He was 32 years old, and they didn't call for negotiations or ransoms because he was a sacrifice for Eid al-Adha. So
For what?
they just wanted to sacrifice him and the two other gentlemen that they were with. But yeah, that was.
Muslim holiday?
Thank you, for having the strength to share these stories. I don't want you to have to relive these incredibly searing things, but I think it's important for others to realize it's not people we don't know far away over there in another world. I mean, this is your family that
Yeah.
this has happened to. And, one of the things that we have seen as a result, and speaking earlier with Carmela, she said we, as Americans, also have to recognize that part of this has been one of the terrible consequences of our invasion, which unleashed all sorts of terrible forces and consequences in that part of the world. But can you tell the group what has happened to the Christian population, the Assyrian Christian population, over now maybe the last couple of decades, since the war and other things, what it was numerically, what it's believed to be now, and kind of what a catastrophic implosion that represents?
Prior to 1991, there was over 3 million Assyrians in modern-day Iraq. Prior to 2004, there was 1.6 million Assyrians. As of right now, the last estimate that was given was roughly between 84,000 to 120,000 maximum.
I mean, stop and think about that for a minute. That's another kind of ethnic cleansing and genocide, because, this is a community that was rooted in such powerful historical, cultural, and above all, spiritual ways in this birthplace. And, to have gone from 3 million to possibly 84,000, what do you think, when we talked, I feel like you sort of said you think it'll go even lower. And
Yeah.
talk, if you would, a little bit about your concerns and your analysis there.
Right now, we're being persecuted by the central Iraqi government for our religion, and even in the Kurdish regional government, the autonomous region, our ethnicity and our indigeneity is in danger. ISIS did a number on us, but our ethnic cleansing hasn't really ended, even since Samede in 1933, 90 years. ISIS also kidnapped 200 Assyrian girls as young as 12 years old in the Nineveh Plains. Almost 70 of them were impregnated, and now in the central Iraqi government, because they were impregnated by ISIS, they're forcefully registered as Muslims as a means of ethnic cleansing and ridding us of our religious beliefs and our identity. Under the Kurdish regional government, we have a lot of human rights violations. Checkpoints are put in place to harass Assyrians, to create obstacles for businesses so that they can't feed their families. And more recently, there was a family that was the mother was severely ill in a family in this region called Nala. She was taken to the hospital and they didn't return until about midnight. And the checkpoint that was put in place before the village didn't allow her back in because they put in place a curfew at 6 p.m. So nobody can enter or exit the region after 6 p.m. They were forced to sleep on the side of the road because they had taken a taxi until daybreak. They weren't allowed in. She was severely ill, and it was videotaped, luckily, and we were able to get an insight on what was happening there. And through social media, it really helped get the government to remove that curfew temporarily, but the restrictions are still in place. with Assyrians being able to bring in food. They're limited on the quantities of food that they're allowed to bring. And it's to say that, oh, we're trying to prevent PKK movement. But the checkpoint excludes Assyrians. Instead of being around them between Assyrians and the PKK, it leaves Assyrians vulnerable to the PKK and the Turkish bombs that are in the region. They're denied access to food and medical needs. Doctors are not often let into the village, so it's very challenging for them.
You know, and again, if you'd be willing to share, even sort of more personal kind of small humiliations that Assyrian women in particular are forced to deal with. You experienced it when you were just there as a visitor. You know, and of course, the autonomous Kurdish region is in some senses a quote-unquote safe haven, but as you've just described, it's got an incredible number of challenges that the community faces there as well. But would you again be willing to share sort of what you encountered as a young American Assyrian woman when you were there, and how you were treated by just random men?
Unfortunately, in northern Iraq, sexual assault is very, I don't want to use the word normalized, but it is normalized, unfortunately, because it's not something that should be normal, but Assyrian women experience it on a daily basis. Even children notice issues of sexual assault, and they grow up realizing that that's just something that they have to put up with. When I went to the ancient Assyrian ruins of the Erbil Citadel in Erbil, I was sexually assaulted. Actually, both times that I visited, both times that I went to that specific citadel, it happened. They make excuses to like graze your chest, or in crowds they grope you, and there's nothing.
And do they know that you're a Christian because of your hair? What is it that you think enables them to just say, oh, we feel she's a legitimate target for us to take advantage?
They can tell because our culture, often there you'll see women and men separated. Assyrian culture isn't that way. Women and men can be friends and can be out together. It's normal, so when we do go out, we typically go with a man just to ensure our safety anyways. By the way we dress, by the way we look, they can tell that we are not the same. They know that we are Assyrians and Christians. So it makes us targets for sexual assault. And when I spoke to women there locally, and they were like, oh yeah, that happens all the time. I was shocked the first time especially, and I was even more shocked to learn that that's something that they just deal with if they want to go shopping for groceries or anything. That's just something they have to put up with.
And those kinds of daily humiliations and making it very clear that we consider you to be a legitimate target, it's one more burden that, you know, makes every aspect of life, even something as basic as going shopping at the market, a reminder that, you know, of a lack of safety, a lack of respect, a lack of dignity. It's so hard. Another question I want to ask, and I sort of want everybody in the audience to think about, the sorts of abuses that Ashura has been sharing with us are not widely known. I think if you walk down a street in Los Angeles or Washington, D.C. or Chicago or any number of places and just ask the average person on the street, are you familiar with the persecution of the Assyrian Christian community in the Middle East? My guess is you'd be lucky to get 1 out of 10 people who would say, yes, I know about that human rights crisis. I know about that abuse. I know that this ancient Christian community has been decimated, you know, is almost disappearing from its homeland. And I think that 1 in 10 would be lucky. It might not be that many. It might be 1 in 20. And you think about it, there are other crises that they have somehow penetrated better. into the broad public consciousness. I think more people are aware, now, as they should be, of the persecution of the Uyghurs, say in China, or maybe even the Rohingya Muslims in Burma. I don't know, I think that also probably isn't widely known, but why do you think it is? What can be done about it? I have some ideas, I'm sure people in the audience have some ideas, but I do think that part of the way we begin to solve problems is first by raising their profile. Again, Carmel and I were talking earlier, and she said, we pleaded with the US government to create a protected zone in the Nineveh province for our community to no avail. But, politics is downstream of culture when in the media and in the social media and by celebrities and in the community, people are talking about an issue. That's what begins to put pressure on governments to take action. That's what it doesn't start at the top with government. So let me throw it to you. Why do you think these crises and these historic and current day threats are not well known, and what can and should we be doing?
I think it's a complex issue. I think on the Western side, there's so much nuance to the region with all of Southwest Asia, North Africa region. I think people don't understand the nuances of the different cultures and the different ethnic groups and the indigenous people there. I think that adds to it, and also with the Assyrian community, I know Carmela works really, really hard to get our voice out there. A lot of Assyrians don't speak out about it because they're afraid of retaliation towards their family in those countries. And it's become so normalized because we faced so many genocides, our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and so on. Even in it's been 2,000 years of genocide that we've faced and religious persecution. So we don't really, we don't know how to express it in a way for people to understand the plight, and we don't really have platforms to do that. Also, a lot of the issues, if you don't go to Iraq or the Mesopotamian region where Assyrians are indigenous to, you don't really know the details and how deep and how hurtful, how hurt those people are, and the extremes of which they go through. With the Nineveh Plains, the 200 Assyrian girls, some as young as 12 that were taken by ISIS, international officials used psychological care as a bargaining chip if they spoke, and they were young and they were scared and they didn't want to be further endangered, so they didn't speak out, and a lot of them unfortunately attempted suicide because they didn't get the psychological care that they needed. So there's so many layers to it. It's just difficult to take care of it just from one angle. We have to attack this issue from multiple angles.
But we do need to find a way to bring it forward into people's consciousness. I am aware, as everybody else in this room is, that we're now in the middle of another presidential campaign season. And I think that's actually, in many ways, an ideal time to find ways to bring these issues to the attention of candidates. They're obviously going to be focused on the big bumper sticker issues, inflation, and the southern border, and all the things that we know are on a non-stop loop. But, if there's an opportunity to go to political events where either candidates themselves or their surrogates and representatives are going to be speaking, and to ask the question, to say, are you aware of the ethnic cleansing and the genocide being faced by the Assyrian Christian community? And what do you think we should be doing about it? And if that question begins popping up, not once randomly, but again and again, then I can assure you that in the meetings of the campaign policy team, they say, you know, we're getting a lot of questions about this. We need to have an answer, for starters, right off the bat. What they want is at least something their guy can say. But that begins to put it into the mix. And suddenly, they do have an awareness of something they haven't thought of before. And it is very often personal stories that make it real. The last thing I thought, because I know we need to leave time for Ambassador Brown back and for questions from the community, but the Assyrian Aid Society that you head up the LA chapter, I assume a lot of your focus is on the humanitarian dimension, trying to help the communities and the individuals and the churches that are still struggling there in person. But I hope you agree, and I guess I would love to hear your thoughts about the importance of not only tackling this from that humanitarian perspective of alleviating suffering and addressing immediate crises, but this broader policy matter. How do we raise the defense of religious freedom as a national foreign policy priority for the United States? So any thoughts you might have on that?
In regards to the Assyrian?
In regards to the Assyrian community and defending persecuted religious minorities more broadly.
I think summits like these help a lot to raise awareness.
I didn't pay her to say that. And I'm an honest woman. I did not, but I really didn't know you were going to say that. I love you. I might run over and kiss her because that is sort of our message.
It's really helpful. It allows us to share. Honestly, there's so much on the Assyrian end. Like, there's video evidence of land grabbing, of fires being set on our crops so that, you know, we're forced to leave. Like, we face so many threats and so much ethnic cleansing, and summits like these allow us to share that with people. And I think it's important that, because the true nature of most religions is to be humanitarian and to help each other, and I love the fact that we all come together to do that, to unite under that goal of helping each other and helping persecuted and ethnically cleansed groups worldwide.
Well, please join me in thanking